baby.
What is up, everybody? Rajay back in the house, and tonight with a special live stream. So thank you all for those of you that have been tuning in. I'm going to actually bring up my guest here in a second, but I'm going to be talking with Joel Geier, author of Flights Across America. So this is going to be pretty interesting to find out some of the big breweries and small breweries and medium breweries, all the breweries he's visited, and talk about some of the experiences he has had and what got him kind of going on into that mission. So stay tuned as we are going to get ready to do that here. And as always, any comments, make sure to put them into the chat so I can ask your questions there as well. And then Joel will be able to see those. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get him pulled up here. And Joel, welcome to the stage, my friend. Great to have you on board.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Rod. I'm really excited to get to talk. I'm always excited to get to talk about craft beer. Getting to talk my book is an added bonus, but really anytime I'm talking about, breweries around the country, I'm a happy guy.
Well, it's definitely great to have you on. And yeah, we're going to definitely get into the book. And we were just talking a little bit before it coming on live. You've been pretty busy. You had the book launch. You're out there on the circuit. You're going to the different book signings, so definitely appreciate the time you have here. But Joel was actually connected to me through my buddy Greg that he teams up, Greg Washington, who does Daddy Porter channel, and they do the Badger Beer Hour.
We're transitioning from that. We're actually about to be doing a whole spiel about that if you tune in here later this month. But yes, just know that Badger Beer Hour, we've been covering the craft beer scene across the state of Wisconsin. So been a lot of fun to get to be part of that project now for coming up on a year now, I think, for me. I know Greg's been doing it for a lot longer than that. I don't know when he started it originally, but quite a while.
Yeah. So a lot of good stuff coming out from the state of Wisconsin. And then Joel was recently on one of our friends' channel that we see on the channel here once every while. In fact, last week he was just here, but Dave from Beer in Front, you were a guest on his podcast, had some pretty good conversation there. So great to have you in the presence here for me to actually have my chance to ask my questions and talk about some of these breweries. Let's talk about some of the flights. Let's talk about the whole experience. And
absolutely,
obviously, we're going to have some beers here. I'm going to crack one open. I don't know if you cracked one open already. I know you have a couple there. So what did you crack open first? Let's see what you, since you're the guest.
So normally when I do these kind of shows, I almost exclusively drink Wisconsin beers and particularly pretty local to Milwaukee. That's just what I normally like to represent. But tonight I actually have, two other from two different states. I have a Michigan and a Missouri beer. And the first one is from Michigan and specifically the UP. And it is a brewery I have not been to yet, but I'm hoping to get there by this summer. It is from Barrel and Beam in Marquette, Michigan, which is way up in the tip there of the UP. And this is called Pret. It is a Michigan-sourced Grisette-style farmhouse ale. I just cracked it open and poured it. It is absolutely lovely on just this first sip that I've got. Some really nice lemongrass, citrusy kind of light notes, but also kind of a farmhousey funk in there. But overall, very complex yet very easy to drink. I feel like this is one that you could either really take your time with, or it could go down a lot quicker than what you mean to. So a very well made beer. Like I said, this is one them and Black Rock's up in Marquette. Marquette's got a sneaky good beer scene from what I've heard, and I'm hoping to get up there before here sometime in 2025.
Excellent. And what's the ABV on that one?
It is 4.9, so a little bit lower, and that's what I tend to drink. I have a stout over here that's 7.1, that's a little bit higher, but for the most part, when I'm at home, I actually prefer drinking lower ABV beers, and the fact that I don't have a lager with me tonight is very strange, because almost most of the beer I drink at home when I'm at home are some form of a lager, or maybe a cream ale, a Kolsch. But yeah, so it is. I didn't even realize that when I grabbed these two, but it's what I happened to be wanting to try tonight, and so here we are.
Okay, excellent. Now I am actually going to crack open one from, well, it was one of the local breweries here in Cincinnati, but they are actually no longer here. And it's one that the viewers saw me pick up last weekend in a crazy deal we'll talk about as we talk about some of the brewery type things. But it's going to be from Taft's Brewing Company, and it is their Juice Trip.
Okay.
It is their double IPA, 8% ABV. And this was one that was one of the 4-packs that were there. They didn't have it displayed, but I happened to go there and it was one of the ones. So Taft's actually just closed this past weekend. This past weekend or weekend before last? Weekend before.
Yeah, I know. And I was bummed when they closed the one too. I know that there's another brewery that went into what was it, the old church? I can't remember the name of that.
Yeah,
place.
that was Taft. That was Taft's brew pub.
Yeah,
that was the church.
Yeah,
and then they had the Brewporium, which is now going to be a Canon Center for one of the other distribution companies.
Yeah.
So sad to see. And myself, we just moved back to Cincinnati after being in Baltimore for 3 years. So going away, Taft's was a great beer to have. Coming back, knew that, and then got back here and found out they were going to be selling beers for like $3 a 6-pack or $10 a case, which was weird. Like, so I had to go figure out what was going on. They got down there and said, well, they're closing on Sunday. So ended up getting some beers. I got like 4 different 6-packs and then a few of the glasses. They were like glasses 2 for $5 or whatever, which is great. Yeah. I got like 4 snifters for $10, which is incredible in itself because usually that's just one. But sad to see, but it's a part of history.
That's been going around. That's been going around recently, unfortunately.
Yeah. So we're going to get into some of that aspect of what you're seeing with some of the breweries that are kind of the closing and not the ones opening and are the first like net loss, so to speak, net down. I don't want to say a loss because usually times when the one goes out, one comes in. So we'll keep an eye on that situation. But in the book, and if you haven't seen the book, I do have a link in the comments as well, which is up top. If I get to the comments here, let me go over because it's different on my screen when I use the StreamYard. But out there on Amazon, you can actually see Flights Across America, and there's a link that you can actually hit. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit that in the YouTube comments. If you're watching on Twitch, you can hit it in the Twitch comments. For the first time, I'm actually going to Facebook on the Facebook page, but I'm not sure if it's in that comment. So if you're watching on Facebook, let me know. And
it's pretty easy to find. I also have links on all my social media stuff. If you follow me on social media, I have pretty much all I've been talking about has been the book. If you just search Flights Across America book, you'll find it. It's not too hard to find. They make it pretty easy now.
No, in fact, when you put it into Google and you put Flights Across America book, all this kind of stuff comes up. So you'll see Joel, Barnes & Noble signing stuff and different things popping up, different places online and in store and retail. So great distribution of the book being out there. So there's definitely something to come across and something I will have to take a look to actually find as well. But I know you mentioned over 1,000 breweries in the book. So how did you get into this? Like what made you start out on this journey to actually want to go visit all these breweries and do these flights and kick it off?
Well, for starters, I guess my dad is my inspiration. I talk about that in the book. I grew up in rural Wisconsin and rural Iowa. And so, in the 90s and early aughts, you would assume, everybody was drinking Miller Lite or Busch Light in those states. And my dad always had Sierra Nevada Pale Ale and Leinenkugel's Creamy Dark. Those were his 2 go-tos. And so he always kind of said that if he was going to drink a beer, he wanted to enjoy it. And I kind of took that to heart. And when I turned 21, I hadn't really drinking much beer at all prior to turning 21. And then when I turned 21, I started, when we were able to legally purchase it and we would go out to buy stuff in college, everybody else would go buy whatever was on sale for a case or whatever. And I would go over to the small craft beer section. It was decent at that point. This would have been 2013, 2014. And I would have done a pick 6 or a variety pack. And I just explored craft beer pretty much my junior and senior year of college. We moved out to Oregon after my wife and I got married out of college. I was really getting into craft beer more and more. And then the following year, when we moved back here to Milwaukee, I realized, I've been to, maybe a couple dozen breweries. That's kind of fun. Maybe I should, kind of keep track of this. And one thing led to another. And then it became a spreadsheet and I started taking notes at the breweries. And then my wife started becoming a travel nurse. And so I was under 100 breweries and she decided to become a travel nurse. And so we lived on the road for a full year. And that really kind of jump started my whole brewery travel social media stuff, was when that kind of took off. And then after we had moved home, had our 2 children, both finished grad school, we decided to just go back out on the road again. And we lived on the road with a toddler and a newborn and raised them for 2.5 years basically on the road. I think my wife and I lived in 9 states, or no, sorry, we lived in 14 states before our 9th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
So we really have been around the block. And like I said in the book, I've been to breweries in all 50 of them, all 50 states. And getting to live in these places enabled me to dive into these beer scenes in a different way. And talking specifically about why breweries, it's, I say in the book, each one is unique. They're a fingerprint. They have a story to tell, and there's always something different about each one. And I love getting to share the stories, sharing the beer, and sharing the background on all of these breweries. Because, obviously the tap rooms are going to be different and the people, but even if you go to 3 breweries and you order a pale ale at each one, they're not going to be the same beer at all. And that's part of the beauty of craft beer is that we all have different palates and likes and dislikes, and that in the craft beer world, there's really something for everybody. And so getting to go out and visit all these places and then share my experiences with everyone on social media and now finally in a book has really been a blessing.
No, that's awesome. And let's give it up for Mrs. Geier there.
Yeah, she hates beer, by the way. She hates beer, by the way. The book is dedicated to her. And the dedication reads, "To my wife, Rosa, I am forever grateful that your love for me outweighs your distaste for beer."
Yeah.
She has been to more breweries than probably some beer fans have. But she loves the food at probably 95% of the breweries that she's been to. So that's been a good thing. But a majority of the time I am going alone, which used to bother me a little bit, but now it's like, oh, she's happy to be with the kids, for the evening while I go to a brewery. So it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to definitely have that support system for sure.
Yes.
So I'm glad that she was able to help you get acclimated to doing that. And just having that opportunity and experience to do that, about 14 states within the first 9 years. That's a lot of movement. I know my wife went kind of go with that. You said around the block. That's like around the suburb plus some. I mean, that's some pretty good movement.
I should clarify, we weren't fully moving. We've owned a home here in the Milwaukee area since 2016, and we bought a different one in 2022, but we always had a permanent residence here. So we were just packing up our minivan with enough stuff to get by clothes wise, and then with kids, boys wise and stuff. And then getting temporary furnished housing in these different places. So we weren't getting a U-Haul every couple months and, getting around places, because that would have been a bit much.
That would have been trying a new marriage out for sure. Yeah. And the kids, I mean, they really enjoy when they get a chance to kind of do this and experience, because they're younger. So you kind of just grab them and go, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to a new place today." Blah blah blah.
They are excellent travelers, and they love to be on the road and getting to see new places.
Excellent. And so that beer glass is wicked. I was going to ask you about that too. That's a pretty sweet looking.
Yeah,
it's got the beaker like from a chemistry set.
Yeah, it's like a stemless like Tiku glass. Yeah. This is actually the only one of my fancier glassware that I haven't gotten. So I have another one here for my other beer. That has like the thing like to help with the aeration. And this one is from Pretentious Glass Company in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I have probably at least 6 or 7 glasses from them, like really cool stuff. And they also have a brewery that they started, but my wife randomly bought me a glass from them, like, I don't know how many years, a lot of years ago. And I loved it so much that she ended up getting me several others for gifts down the road. And I did get to visit them because, like I said, they have one of the more unique places I've been. They have started off as the glass blowing studio, and then they ended up opening up the brewery next door. So you can go in and get a flight with their custom made, and they have like all their custom glassware that they actually use in the brewery. And then next door is like the glass studio where you can buy different types of glassware stuff. And the actual glass blowing studio is also there. So it's open, so you can walk back and see the people blowing glass for what is going to be used in the brewery next door. So a really, really cool space.
Excellent. So one of the things there for everybody that's watching here, unfortunately, if you're listening to this back on the podcast when this posts, you have to come to the YouTube or Facebook or Twitch to see the lives, but you can always still leave comments and we'll get your questions answered. I'll reach out to Joel if you are listening on the playback. Is for those of you putting questions into the comments section, that's great. I actually encourage that. I look forward to that because I have a list of stuff I was going to ask Joel about, but I always want that participation. So I like
me too.
I love questions in too. So James, he actually asked, and cheers to you, James, and cheers to being here. And speaking of cheers, as we get started, we should raise one to Jimmy Carter, because without him
homebrewing, baby,
and the law that got passed, we wouldn't have had the explosion we did have for craft beer. So cheers to that as well. But James said, most underrated city for beer that you've come across.
Oh man, there's so many of them at this point. Because the thing I tell people is that at this juncture, it is pretty true that you can find good beer being made virtually everywhere across the country at this point. Even states like Mississippi and West Virginia now have quality breweries that are making good beer.
Hey, I went to school at WVU now. We
Yeah,
careful on that line. Careful.
I'm going to tell you that. So I actually went.
Even though they can't spell West Virginia right on the TV commercial.
Well, that's what I can. I mean, Charleston, West Virginia. Actually, I stopped through there and went to 3 breweries and had really, really good beer. 2 of them were phenomenal. Fife Street and Short Story, great stuff. But some underrated places. I always tell people Duluth, Minnesota is one up there on the North Shore in Lake Superior. They Bent Paddle, Ursa Minor, Castle Danger right up the road, places like Hoops and Blacklist. Duluth is a very underrated city in general. It's a really fun place to visit. If you go in the warmer months, I have not been there in winter, so I cannot, that would probably be a little bit of a different visit. Yeah. But if you go there in the summer, it's awesome there on the lake. It's really, really cool city. Great beer scene. One that I would throw out there too, that really was probably like, I don't know, underrated is hard because there's really only, I think, 4 or 5 breweries, maybe 5 breweries in the city. So it's hard to like fully say that it's underrated because it is small, but Bismarck, North Dakota. I went to 3 breweries and all 3 of them I had really good beer at all 3. And one in particular, Gideon's Brewing Company, which was right downtown, was absolutely phenomenal. All 4 beers on my flight were great. The Hefeweizen in particular, I believe was one of the nominees for, I think one of my best beers that year. So they make really good beer. I would say Albuquerque, New Mexico flies a little under the radar, and they have a ton of breweries. Charleston, Spokane. I would say one other one too is kind of, Salt Lake City gets overlooked because everyone assumes that, Utah and their weird laws with, I think it's still 5% that you can serve on tap. And I was there because I was there once when it was 5% in 2021. But then I was also there in 2018, and at that point, it was still 4% that you could have on tap. Tap. And the ABV could be anything to go in bottles, but on tap it could only be 4%, now 5%. And I was really impressed with the brewer's ability to cover a depth of styles and have it be really good while remaining with those, with that ABV constraint. Templin Family is the one I would shout out in Salt Lake City too. So there's a lot of good places for sure.
Well, Duluth kind of surprises me off the ones you rattled just because and part of the job I do in the daytime, I used to handle like the Minnesota area, and a lot of guys know I do beer for the people I work with. So they're always asking, what beer are you drinking now?
Yeah.
And I just feel like, because Minnesota is just right up there, where Wisconsin pretty much, a little north or whatever, but I just feel like that's an area where you would think there would probably be good beer coming from. But
yeah, I mean, the Twin Cities, I think the Twin Cities has a really good beer scene, St. Paul in particular, but Duluth is so remote that I think that's why, like, you have to make a purposeful trip to go to Duluth. People aren't accidentally driving through Duluth to go anywhere else. Like, you're not going through Duluth to get to anything else. Right. So, unless you're going up to the Northwood, like the Boundary Waters or whatever it is up there. So Duluth definitely is one of those like places that, really is under the radar, I would say, for sure, when it comes to beer.
Yeah, I have a review coming up on one when I got back here. One of the breweries that I was always fond of was out of Athens, Ohio, which is, you probably know Jackie O's, right? So and I was talking to doing the video, and it's just like, you don't end up in Athens. Either you're going to Ohio U or you're going to Jackie O's. Any other reason, like, why are you in Athens, Ohio? So I can definitely get where those areas get kicked over. With the Utah, mentioned like that 5% tap, it's kind of interesting just because when I think of Utah in my mind, because one of the first breweries I really started to enjoy out of Utah was Uintah Brewing, which actually makes higher beers, but I guess they ship a lot of them out of state.
Yep.
And then Epic, obviously, Big Bad Baptist.
Well, so they can sell those to go. That's the big difference, is that Utah is weird because in other states there are constraints on how big the ABV can be to still classify it as beer and sell it as a brewery. In Utah, they actually don't. Like in Utah, you can make as high of an ABV beer as you want to, essentially, if you are selling it in like cans or bottles to go. You just can't serve it in the tap room. So that is an interesting little kind of twist on what you think of when you're thinking of Utah beer. Definitely in the top like 3 most unique states when it comes to some of their beer laws.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of just interesting because, you can't sell it in a tap room, but if people are getting beers to go and they're at their local park barbecue? Are they able to actually drink them? I wonder if there's laws
I,
against them
I
actually
think
cracking them open there like they do.
Yeah,
Like here,
I don't know what I don't know exactly. I didn't try to crack open a Big Bag Baptist and in like the square by the temple in Salt Lake City.
right?
So
And I
I
wouldn't
didn't find
recommend you
that one
doing
out.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that someone may come and approach you if you did that.
But a phenomenal beer. I've got a ton of Big Bad Baptists actually worked through myself. But Robert actually asked favorite spot in Phoenix.
Yeah, so I don't have as much experience in Phoenix as what I would like. It's actually been several years since I was there, but I can say, and I think I know that there are probably some other ones that would be contenders, but my favorite is Wren House out there. Wren House, I think they had a coffee stout, I want to say. That was my favorite there. Really cool tap room too, like this old little, like I think it was a house / bakery type place. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It's in the book, so I know that that's jotted down. But yeah, that's what I would say would have been my favorite spot in Phoenix for sure.
Okay. And being out of Iowa as well, I don't know how often you kind of get back to there again. I'm sure you probably still have family and stuff there.
My in-laws are, yes, my in-laws are down there. So
when you think of Iowa, I mean, the elephant in the room that I always think of is like Toppling Goliath. So how many of the breweries are there like rival Toppling Goliath, or are they kind of just the King Kong of all the breweries? And it's kind of like
if you're talking about distribution, name recognition, marketing, all that stuff, yeah, Toppling Goliath is obviously kind of probably like the biggest thing in Iowa craft beer. I would say that's pretty safe. I mean, there's some other fairly large regional ones that kind of distribute around some, but nothing of Toppling Goliath stature. If we're talking quality and experience at the brewery, I would say there are several that rival Toppling Goliath in terms of both the beer and the experience. Even one in Decorah itself, Pulpit Rock, I would say is right up there with them, and they have a much smaller, obviously more intimate tap room. That's actually in Decorah. Because for those who know, Toppling Goliath eventually moved. They have a huge facility now. It's a really cool place to visit, but it's a huge facility like outside of town now, kind of off by itself. And the other place is actually still in Decorah, Pulpit Rock. But yeah, there's a lot of really good. One that I just went to, Great Revivalist in Clinton, Iowa, which is not too far from where I grew up. They renovated a beautiful old church, just a gorgeous tap room, and really, really good beer. They have some really good beer there. Big Grove is another one that makes some good beer. That's another pretty big name. I know I have not been there, but I'm hoping to stop through Des Moines later this year. Lua Brewing Company. I know they got something like a 4.22 on Untapped, which again, I'm not a big Untapped fan because for several reasons, but they're obviously doing some things right. And I know that they just got written about. I forget which publication wrote about them as one of the best breweries for 2024 or 2025. Nice. So that's one that I think when I get there may become my new favorite in the state of Iowa. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, Toppling Goliath obviously was the big name for a long time. And, to a certain extent, they still are. Everybody knows Pseudo Sue and, all their barrel aging beers. But in reality, there's a lot of good beer being made in Iowa. And there's a lot of breweries that I prefer over Toppling Goliath for sure.
Okay. All right, cool. So now I'm curious about the Untapped thing, but
we get a couple beers of me, and then I'll go off the hook on that.
You mentioned the church thing too, which is something in itself because I mentioned Taps earlier, which you're familiar with Taps in the old church they had here in Cincinnati, Urban Artifact. They kind of did that in the church as well, an old church they renovated. How often do you see that out there? Is that something kind of a little bit of a trend you're seeing in some spots, or is it just
honestly? I've been
pops up from time to time.
I'm trying to think. I counted them up at one point. So my dad is a Lutheran minister.
Okay.
And so, him being the reason I'm into craft beer, church breweries have always been my favorite. And probably my favorite is actually from Baltimore, Ministry of Brewing. I think I think they used to be called Ministry of Brew, but apparently they changed how I don't know, but it's
I know it's Ministry of Brewing now.
I think I refer to it as Ministry of Brew in the book, but people will be able to figure it out. There's not many other church breweries like that. But that one, and I mentioned Great Revivals in Clinton, St. Joseph in Indianapolis is another one. I've been to a whole bunch that have been in these old renovated churches. And it's not just churches, though. And I talk about in the book that one of my favorite things about breweries is when they are taking over a building, a structure in a community that has some real history to it, and that, you know, has a unique kind of setting that provides a kind of a window into that community and then the history there, whether, you know, it's a bank, a school. I was actually there's one in Iowa, speaking of Iowa again, called Beer in the Barn, and it is located inside the oldest standing barn in the state of Iowa.
Oh, wow.
And
That's it. Yeah.
obviously Iowa's got a lot of barns. So the fact that it's in the oldest one tells you something. I think it's like it's 18 something.
Okay.
And it's all original limestone, really unique interior with different kind of levels and room shapes and everything. And I've been to one inside like an old theater where they didn't even like hardly take out any of the original like theater seats, and you can just sit there like you're going to watch a movie. So those are some of the coolest things for me is when the tap room is in this really unique setting. And I do think there was a really good, you know, repurposing job that a lot of breweries did with that. Not always the most cost effective, which I think now you may see less of that because it is easier to go into a small strip mall or a small business park in terms of the cost for it. But I think in terms of the experience and being able to draw people in, if you have a unique place in the community that people remember as, oh yeah, you know, that used to be the old textile mill, or, you know, oh yeah, that's actually the old middle school gym, or what would you know, and so that is something that I think can really help bring people into the brewery is when it's part of the community in that kind of manner.
Yeah. And I think that ties the community together, right? Gives them something to come back to, and the memories.
Well, and sometimes
they'll
those
have of the
buildings,
place.
yeah, and sometimes those buildings have been, you know, dilapidated and forgotten. I know, and you know, I've talked with owners before, and they've showed me pictures, and you know, in these smaller towns where a building on the main street was just had been sitting for decades and was completely ruined, and then they came along and completely fixed it up, and now they're part of a more walkable downtown and bringing more business in, and helping to rejuvenate that area.
Yeah, and that's kind of some of the stuff you would see like around some of the Baltimore area where we were there for the last few years. Is some of the areas where it's down, and there's some parts of the community where it's kind of getting built back up on stuff too. So,
well, did you know Baltimore is one of the places that we lived while we traveled? We lived there for 3 months. It was before you would have gotten there. It would have been in 2021.
Okay.
But we did live there for the summer of 2021 for 3 months, and we loved. We were literally half a block from Camden Yards.
Oh shoot, yeah.
Yeah,
See,
we were right down there, and had a great time living there.
Yeah, we stayed on Lombard Street, so I was like just 2 blocks from Camden Yard, and
Yeah,
right
so
there
we were
where
probably
the Pratt
a
Street Ale
stone's
House.
throw.
Yeah, it's a nice area down there. Pratt Street Ale House was right there as well. During the spring, summer, even fall, nice little walk down to the water and everything like that, and little spots there. Now they're doing some renovations and stuff down there more recently, but nice little getaway. You can kind of do some stuff there and walk across to different parts, and not a bad walk at all.
No, not at all.
One of my other friends, she was a big Edgar Allan Poe fan, so went up to like the grave one time, took some pictures of the grave, sent it to her, and like the Poe house and all that kind of stuff. So just a lot of different stuff you can do around there. It's got a historical, nice culture feel to it as some of the areas there too. Now, don't get me wrong. If you take a wrong turn in Baltimore, you'd be like, I need to.
Yeah, no, I drove through a few of those parts too. And don't get me wrong, like there are certainly parts of Baltimore that you would prefer to stay away from, but overall we love the city, and it obviously has a national perception. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like, but most cities have those kind of areas too. Like Baltimore has some awesome areas and some really cool neighborhoods. And you know, I loved being around downtown and going, like we live close enough that I could go, like you said, I would go for my runs around. I'd go around Camden Yards and down to the water, and you know, there's that huge park kind of up on that hill. I forget the name of it. That looks out onto the skyline. And my kids loved going to the National Aquarium while we were there. So I mean, there's some really good stuff going on in Baltimore for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if you got a chance to go there when you were there, but one of the cool breweries I found when I was in Baltimore, and I say cool because it's always nice when you can go to a brewery and they're not always tripping on giving you the next hazy IPA. And they got other good quality stuff, right? So I like to mix it up and being able to get some of that stuff. But Guilford, so Guilford Brewing, who is basically based after a European type brewery, where you got the only IPA they would have was been an English IPA, but you would get a lot more of the European type styles. Now, recently, they had just bought Flying Fish from up in New Jersey. because they had a went under. But so they do serve some of their stuff there where you can get like some of the to-go stuff that they actually have to offer. But as a nice sit-down place and get in, simulate as best we can, like in America, food that you might get if you were overseas. And they got a great chef. We actually went there one night. The chef sat down with us. And we talked for like 20 or 30 minutes with him on just the different things and the stuff they were putting out and all that kind of stuff. It's really a nice little cool different spot where it's not just the American, here's an IPA, pucker up, here we go. Here's a sour, here's this or that. Here's like just some nice, easy drinking lagers, really.
Yeah, and I did. They were pretty freshly open. I don't remember how long they'd been open when I was living there, but no, I did get there. And it's a really cool building too. This is another one that the history of the building it was the Crown Cork and Seal Factory that was built in 1898. And a little fun fact about this, I don't know if you know this, the Crown Cork and Seal Company was an enterprise started by William Painter, and he invented the bottle cap there. So you can thank him when you pop open a bottle cap off your beer. You can thank him. And that is where that got that start there. I actually learned that. I don't know if you're familiar with Marino Prey. She's a beer writer that was out there. She wrote the book Brewing in Baltimore and Beer in Maryland, a history of breweries since colonial times. And I mentioned that in the book too, but she's the one who gave me that fun fact when she came on the podcast.
Okay.
And so that's one thing I talk about in Baltimore is that we already talked about Ministry of Brewing and, now Guilford Hall. And I talk about several others in the book, that Baltimore is one place where a lot of the breweries have rejuvenated old buildings that were both buildings that were kind of left behind and buildings that were in neighborhoods that didn't have a whole lot going on prior to breweries coming in and opening up. So really, really cool uses of those buildings. And I loved getting to shout out Baltimore in that manner.
Yeah. And if it's something where, not sure, we can talk about that, like where you're going to spots and maybe it's not a brewery, but maybe it's a tap house or whatever, like in Baltimore, a place called Max's. Yeah. And for someone that's coming in and maybe they can't get to a brewery, here's a place where I think they had, I want to 31 or 32 different taps or whatever. They give you a nice sampling of what you can find around Baltimore.
Yeah, so 100%.
So I had met one
beer bar.
Yeah. And I had met one of my friends and viewers actually the channel here when he came up to Baltimore. We had a great time just there and trying the different beers and stuff. So sometimes not even getting to the brewery, but it's kind of getting into that. Although getting to the brewery is always that special type thing, going to the source, right? To be able to enjoy it there and see how it's made, see how it's crafted. As far as like all the breweries, do you even know what like the total number you've been to? Are you tracking that still? Because I know it's just over 1,000 in the book, but I know it's way more than that you've been to.
So 13, so I haven't updated my stats on social media or done on my posts yet because we just got home this weekend from a trip out to California to visit family, and I got to several while we were out there. I want to say it's 1,379 now. 1,379 breweries.
Wow.
Across all 50 states. I think at the time when I finished writing the book, it was when I said it was 1,367. So been to a handful since then, but and and as you mentioned, over 1,000 are mentioned in the book, and I think all but a handful of them are ones that I personally visited. I gave a few shout outs in the book here and there for maybe a couple breweries that I didn't visit, but that I know are places that people may want to get to. But yeah, I have taken track, and I said, starting at brewery number 56, I've taken handwritten notes at every brewery visit that I've done. I have a little portfolio notepad type thing that I take with me and sitting there jotting down my notes, looking like, a nerd. And I'm happy to wear that tag. So that's just something that I got it after I went with my dad. I mentioned going to brews with my dad. I think we went to 4 in the same day in St. Paul when I was visiting him. And that was the first time I had gone to that many in one day. And all of a sudden you get home and you're like, oh, I had 4 flights. That's 16 beers. That's a lot of beers to try to remember exactly how you felt about it. It's about each single one and the names and the styles and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, you know what? I need to go buy a notebook. And so, and since then I've kept that same portfolio now has been with me since, now going on 8 years probably. And, like over 1,300 breweries, and that same portfolio has been with me the whole time. The notepad has changed, but I got a big old stack of them sitting in my basement right now. And like I said, I got spreadsheets. Very nerdy about all this stuff, but it came in handy when it came time to write the book. I can tell you.
I'm sure it did. Yeah. The book thing, though. I mean, and God bless you there on the books. I mean, I'm a journalist. I graduated a journalism degree, so I know how much effort you have to put in when you're doing some writing type stuff. But what made you decide to do it the book way via other media you could have done now? A lot of people would do it the video, or they'll just do it, other ways. But to go back to the old school, which is, it's always nice to have a nice little book to sit there and read and enjoy or whatever. But a lot of the younger folks, I mean, I say that because I'm older, but like, young folks need to be more dialed into the digital stuff.
I'm now 32, so I guess I'm still considered younger. And I definitely I'm a millennial. I'm a youngerish millennial. But I guess, like I said, I mean, I've done it taking notes this whole time. I'm obviously a little bit old school. I mean, I do social media, but my wife is very much. We actually have a library in our house. My wife's a very avid reader, and I don't know. I guess I just always kind of viewed it as that I had the idea for it the first time we were traveling, when I only had 200 or 300 breweries under my belt.
Right.
And I kind of started to write something that then I kind of realized, okay, this isn't really going to flesh out to what it would need to be, what I really want. And then when we were traveling the second time, I was like, I kind of told myself, okay, once I knew that I was going to get to 1,000 breweries, I told myself, okay, I think I'm going to start working on this. 1,000, like that seems like it's substantial enough. I've been a lot of places. At the time, I didn't know that I was going to get to all 50 states, because that didn't happen until this past year. I actually delayed the book probably by 5-6 months because of our planned trip to Alaska. We were supposed to go to Hawaii and Alaska in 2020 and 2021. Obviously, that didn't pan out because of the pandemic. But so I was able to do that, though, which obviously helped the book feel more complete to me. But the social media has been really cool. I've loved doing social media and getting to share all my brewery visits, but it's not an easy way for someone to go and if they want, unless they message me and try to ask questions, and everything. And even then it's you don't want to ask questions for every single city and all this stuff. There isn't an easy way to go through my account and, and try to look through all the different breweries. If they're not arranged by certain city or states, you can try to search for it, but Instagram doesn't have a search function like that. And Twitter/X, I've been going through it and I swear they've been deleting a lot of old tweets and stuff, because I've tried to go back now because I knew were there previously when I was writing the book, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and that are dead. I can't find it. They're no longer there if I try to search for them. So who knows what's happening over there, but I guess I wanted to have kind of just one thing that symbolized this whole experience I've had traveling. And I felt that a book was kind of the best physical way to do that. And I also I just felt it was really cool. It's something that I kind of just wanted to do, honestly, was writing a book. And this was the opportunity that I had to do that. And it enables me to share this with people in kind of not, like you said, kind of an old school way, but in a way that it reads, like I said, it's part travel guide, but it's also part how-to guide and part memoir. So it's more than just me listing breweries. It's talking about my full experiences. It's trying to paint what it was like, what the beer scene is like in these cities. It talks about my experiences, trying to plan a vacation around beer, what I look for in a brewery, questions I try to ask people at a brewery, and why I ask those questions. So it's a lot more than simply brewery A, go here for this beer. Brewery B, go here for this beer. That's not what this book is. There's more to it than that. And it's just my essential kind of a love letter, essentially, to visiting craft breweries. And now that the portion of our lives where we're no longer permanent, we're no longer traveling on the road, we're kind of home more permanently. My daughter started kindergarten. My other son's going to start pre-K next fall. We still like to go on trips and everything, but the time in our lives where we were constantly living different places, and I was going, averaging damn near a brewery a day, a new brewery a day,
hell of an average.
Well, I think I went to close to, I think it's 270 or 280 breweries in 1 year at one point. And but now it's like, okay, I'm still going to visit new breweries when I can, but this is kind of putting a bow on that chapter of my life as well. It's kind of saying, you know, this is what I experienced over the last essentially 7 years, visiting over 1,000 breweries across all 50 states. I'm able to share this with people, and I hope that people enjoy it. And I think they do, you know, because I tried to write it in a way that the most nerdy beer lover is going to learn facts and learn things that they don't necessarily know, that they're going to enjoy it, while also being a book that a more novice craft beer person, maybe just getting into craft beer, or maybe they've been drinking craft beer but haven't really gotten into visiting breweries, it'll get them to take that next step and inspire them to look to visiting breweries, even if it's just local, because a lot of people don't even visit all their breweries that are local. I mean, because most places like Milwaukee's got, you know, 50, 60 breweries within, you know, 20, 30 minutes of downtown probably. And it's like, how many people have actually been to a majority of those breweries? Probably not very many. So that's part of this book is that, you know, my slogan that I always used to say with my podcast that I formerly did was, whether it's where you're visiting or where you're living, be sure to drink local everywhere, because not everybody has the ability to go and travel, but you do have the ability to go and support your local businesses that are around you. So that's kind of what I try to preach in this book, is that no matter where you're living, there are going to be some local craft breweries that could use your support. And if you're not able to travel, hopefully this book can also be like a little window, and you can travel from, you know, your easy chair or your bed or whatever, wherever you read from. You know, this book can be your window into seeing breweries around the country in kind of a different manner.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good way to look at it. Because I mean, here in Cincinnati, I can say last time I looked, I haven't looked since I've been back, but before we left, I think we had probably 60 to 70 breweries within kind of that 275 loop type area.
Yeah.
And myself, I mean, I do a lot of the stuff with the reviews and different things where I'm at the house doing a lot of stuff. But I don't get out to all the different breweries, although I'm picking up some of the local stuff. So I try to get out there, and it makes a difference when you get out to the brewery to have an experience. Like, for instance, one of the breweries here in Cincinnati, I don't know if you had a chance to go down, it was Mount Carmel Brewing.
I have not. No.
Yeah. So this is like in the Eastgate area of Cincinnati. And they always make great beer. They have one of the best nut brown ales I've had from anybody. And I always forget about it till I have it. Well, we have a place in Cincinnati called Jungle Gyms, which is like known like being one of the best beer places to buy beer from in the country. But it's not far from there. So one day I was at Jungle Gyms, like, yeah, I'm going to go to Mount Carmel. I haven't been there. Whatever. Get out to Mount Carmel. It's this beautiful scenery. They got the brewery. They got a little lake out there. You get the beer at the bar. You sit out there at the lake. It's just a great view. Like, you wouldn't have got that unless you went to the brewery. And then it enhances the experience because you're at the brewery versus me just being back here. And I can tell you how good the beer is, but when you change the scenery and the setting, it makes it that much more different, which 100%. Is why you try to get people to go. Yeah. So it was like a great experience.
Well, and on top of that, like you said, though, even in like with a book like this, even if you can't physically visit these places, if you're more familiar with them and you see their beer in distribution, you may recognize the name and be like, oh, hey, I've heard of that place. I've heard they have good beer. I'm going to give them a try. Because I don't know every single brewery in the country. There's 10,000 of these things. Like there's no way to memorize every single brewery in every single state. It's not possible. And so having a way to at least learn more about some of the breweries in different parts of the country, now that, you know, a lot more breweries are kind of distributing even regionally and locally, I think it's a really good, you know, kind of tool.
Yeah. And to your point there too, I had just actually written a piece that I posted on the LinkedIn Rajay BeerVentures page, but also shared, I think, on Facebook and a few other spots, just about, you know, taps and going there and coming back, finding where we're going, and kind of a piece about make sure you go out, and if you got local breweries you want to see make it, go out and support them because they may not be here, and kind of using that as kind of evidence of that. Like, you know, here's a brewery that's doing some really good beers. Everybody seemed to really like what they're doing, but not enough people were able to support coming out, and now they're not going to be there more, right? So if you got a good brewery, you got to be out there also to make an appearance when you can here and show that support. So
absolutely 100%.
Yeah. But, you know, in talking about the different breweries and stuff, like you mentioned kind of some of the stuff, but like, what are some of the more interesting breweries you actually visited? Because one that we have here in Northern Kentucky, which is part of the Cincinnati area, is called Burkus.
Okay.
So if you get a chance to come back, it's Burkus. And what it is basically a circus designed brewery. So they do like circus acts and all that kind of stuff inside the brewery and everything like that. So, like, what are some of the more interesting concepts you've
Yeah,
seen out
I've
there?
I've definitely got that. First, though, I'm going to quit because I did crack open my other one here.
Okay.
I have from Missouri. My good friend Brian lives in St. Louis, and this is from St. Louis. Four Hands Brewing there.
Okay.
And this is Absence of Light, a peanut butter chocolate milk stout, and peanut butter is probably my favorite adjunct in a stout. Just a personal preference. And in porters, I've had some very, very good ones. And right off the bat, I can already tell you I'm smelling it on this one, and I love it.
You like some peanut butter?
I do. I'm loving that.
One brewery, if you haven't been to it, that you might get on your list if you get down to Nashville, Tailgate Brewery.
Tailgate, yep. Tailgate,
they do some pretty good peanut butter.
We lived in Nashville for 3 months, actually. That was
there you go.
I know, like I said, we have 14 states. There's quite a few places that we've lived in. So you know that was another one, and yes, that was another good place for sure. But so funny that you were asking about most interesting, and you may have seen. So at the end of each year, I'm actually about to post these later this week. I do an annual review where I give out 20 awards, and I have 5 nominees for each award and then a winner. And these range from best tap handle to, best IPA. And 2 of the awards I have, I talk about, best taproom interior, which is like we talked about, that can be what makes the brewery unique. And oftentimes a unique, very cool, unique taproom, like Ministry of Brew won it 1 year for me. And I also have most interesting brewery is an award, and most interesting beer. But so for most interesting beer, I won't give away everything because I want people to go and buy the book, of course. But here, let me find out most interesting brewery. So I have a couple. I already mentioned one of them that won, and that was Pretentious, where you have a literal glass blowing studio that's attached to the tap room, essentially, and they are hand blowing glass that can then be used in the tap room, or that you can buy and take home for your own beers. Another one, Books and Brews, which is out of the Indianapolis area. They are part brewery, part used bookstore. You go in and there are shelves of books on all the walls, and you can buy those books for like $2. And I think all the books like pretty much donated. So all the proceeds actually go towards a local organization that works on adult literacy programs. So a really cool brewery there. Like I said, that was the one that, as my wife being an avid reader, that she truly was excited to go to because she did buy some books. And I would say White Labs is one. So they are out of San Diego, and they also have a location in Asheville. And they started off as a yeast manufacturing company, and they still do manufacture yeast. But their brewery and then in their tap room, their beers are essentially produced to showcase yeast, and not in a like, oh, the yeast is really strong or something like that. That's not at all what yeast is. What they do is they make several different beers, but then each beer is broken up into 2 or 3 batches, and then they use different strains of yeast in each batch. And so when I visited, I tried 2 different beers, but I tried in each beer 2 different yeast strains. So I had 4 total beers. And but then, like I said, 2 of the beers were the same, but the only thing that was different was the yeast. And the difference in the beer, in color, in texture, in taste, in aroma, all of it is different. And it's a really unique way to show how an ingredient like yeast plays such a crucial role in a beer. Because people often, hops are obviously kind of the one that most people think about when, or the malt, you think about, the dark malts for a dark beer, or, the Pilsner malt, or the different types of IPA for different IPA, or different types of hops for IPAs. And people do, I think, some think about the yeast, but I would say it's probably, third that people think about it, behind, both hops and malts, and, even the water. And this place showcases just how much that yeast will affect the beer you're drinking, which is really, really cool in my eyes. And one other one that I visited this past year, Commerce Street Brewery Hotel. It's here in Wisconsin, Mineral Point, Wisconsin. And it's in an old historic building in this small town of a couple thousand people, old brick building from like the 19th century. And it is now, the lower level is the brewery and tap room, and the upper 2 levels are hotel. Although I would classify it more kind of like, it has more of a bed and breakfast kind of look.
Okay.
I saw pictures of the rooms and everything. Just feels more bed and breakfasty than like a. It's not a Motel 6 or or a DoubleTree or something. That's not what you're going to. It's much more individualized than that. But yeah, so those would be a couple. Like I said, there's a lot more listed in the book, both in the award, because I actually have at the end, I have my award section. So I have all the award winners and honorable mentions for all 20 awards, which is kind of my best of section because, people always ask, oh, what's your favorite brewery and your favorite beers? And there isn't an answer to that question.
There never is, right?
And that's why I included this section, though, to be like, here are some of my favorites that you can kind of, draw from. And you can, then obviously throughout the book, there's a lot of other mentions of unique attributes of certain breweries. Because that is like you just were talking about. I mean, that's part of the fun is finding these unique breweries and getting to experience them.
Yeah. And that's what kind of creates those memories, right? And
100%.
Just like, food pretty much. I mean, I consider beers food. I mean, it's for my they all make a beer, right? So
I mean people used to use it as a ration. Like wasn't on the Mayflower, beer was given as a ration. And you know what?
I mean, as the story goes, that's why they stopped at Plymouth Rock. They were out of beer.
Hold on. Let me look. I have one. I found right here. I have a story for that.
Okay.
So Plymouth, Massachusetts, Mayflower Brewing Company in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So John Alden was a beer barrel cooper on board the actual Mayflower. However, back in 1692, so John Alden, he was a beer barrel cooper, and they are obviously, if people don't know, they were the people that tended to the wooden barrels that held the beer, and that sailors on board the Mayflower were given 1 gallon of beer for a daily ration. One of his 10th great grandsons, so great grandsons, opened up this brewery in Plymouth and called it Mayflower Brewing.
There you go.
One of the direct descendants of the beer barrel cooper on the Mayflower opened up a brewery in Plymouth called Mayflower Brewing. To me, is probably the coolest owner story I've ever heard in my travels. I don't think you can top that. I don't know how you would top that. Because I've heard some other cool ones too, but I mean, being a descendant of the guy that brought the beer over on the Mayflower, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in Europe you can probably find some other cool, like really, really story. But I'm like, in terms of America, you can't really top that.
That beats the whole marketing behind the IPA, right? So, it's interesting because the whole thing around that, and it was something I found out when I first started getting into beer years ago, but had not known previously, was the whole thing around the Pilgrims. Basically, they did have the beer on there, and the beer got low, and they were kind of supposed to go to a different part of the country, maybe like down towards Jamestown or wherever. And it was like, we're out of beer. What do you mean we're out of beer? We're out of beer. Well, pull over. Stop right there. We'll make some more. And that's how they ended in Plymouth Rock. Like everything stops here because we have no beer. So everybody off the boat.
So, Plymouth is famous because somebody ran out of beer. That's pretty much what happened there.
Drop anchor. We're done.
This goose is cooked. I need to go find. I think I see some malts on shore there. It looks like. We'll run over there and start to ferment.
It is funny. It's always funny when you find these historical contexts on stuff. So as far as like some of the beer styles, when you go to the breweries, like what are some of the beer styles you kind of get into? What kind of draws? I know you mentioned about kind of like not having a lager with you there tonight. But like what kind of beer styles? Like when you like, for me, like if I go into a brewery and I see a Rausch beer, it's automatically that one. Put it down. I see like a sour or something. It's like, there's certain beers that kind of pop out. It's like, okay, you're automatically on the list. So like what kind of beer styles kind of draw you in to get there?
So to answer that question first, I would say right now, because it's changed obviously over the years.
Sure.
But for recently, I mentioned lager for the last several years have been my favorite. And for the last, I would say 6 months to a year, Czech lagers have been my favorite, whether it's pale or dark Czech lagers, mind you. And when I go to a brewery, if it's your typical run-of-the-mill brewery, it's got 12 to 16 taps, variety of styles, I typically am going to try to get something light, something dark, something hoppy, and then a wild card.
Okay.
But I also try to take into account if I only can ask if it's busy and I can really only ask like maybe one question to the people working there. I'm going to ask to make sure, okay, what are your flagships or what styles are you best known for? Because some breweries don't have flagships, you know, they're just constantly cranking out new stuff. But it's like, okay, are there certain things that you're best known for? And sometimes that answer surprises you. I've been to a brewery. The story I tell it in the book is that in 2018, going through Dallas, Texas, stopping at Pedicolis Brewing, filling out my flight card, I got down to my last one. And I hadn't really gotten into this was still pretty early in my travels, but I just so happened to ask like, hey, like what should I get for my fourth one? And the guy said, oh, well, we're best known, like our flagship is Velvet Hammer, our Imperial Red Ale. And it's like over 8%. It's won a whole bunch of medals at US World Beer Cup and, you know, other contests. That's never a style I would have otherwise guessed was a flagship or a style I would have necessarily picked on my flight. And by golly, it was my favorite one of the flight. Yeah. And that is why I always try to ask, because breweries are going to have different things dialed in differently. You know, they're going to have certain styles that they specialize in. Obviously, there's some breweries that you go to, 10 of the 12 taps are lager, are IPAs, or there's breweries that specialize fully in sours. And obviously there you're taking a much different approach. But on your typical brewery, I like to get a variety because I want to get a full kind of you can't ever get a full picture of a brewery on one visit. Not possible. I like to get as good of a picture of a brewery as possible in my flight by getting a variety and kind of trying to figure out and asking what they're best known for, so I can include some of that in my flight. But yeah, I would say I'm also big on sours. I love a good Hefeweizen as well. I'm huge on Kolsch. Love a good cream ale. And yeah, with stouts, like I said, it depends on adjuncts too. I typically don't go big ABV. I typically don't like to go into the double-digit ABV when I'm out traveling and doing flights for multiple reasons. And I honestly that's not my cup of tea. That's the only thing. Double-digit ABV is kind of the only thing that I've never really gotten into. Everything else I drink and can enjoy. But yeah, just depending on the different adjuncts. And the other thing that will get me to order a beer is something that I have never seen before. Which obviously has become harder and harder to find. And now at this point is no longer a style that I haven't necessarily seen. It's more of like, okay, what the heck did they throw in, you know, the kettle with all the, what ingredients did they toss into this sucker to make it weird? But I like, especially when you're getting a flight, you know, you're not getting like a full pour. It's kind of fun to throw if there's something weird on there. I remember there was one in Maryland that used real shrimp and like seasonings from Hysteria.
Oh, because they go for the Old Bay and stuff all the time.
Yeah. Where's the here? So like I've had some. I had one in Miami that was a sour ale conditioned with rum and Coke, as well as lime ice cream. The craziest one I've ever had was in Lincoln, Nebraska, of all places, and apparently it's a thing in that part of Nebraska, or like in Nebraska, or that part of Nebraska, or whatever, to eat your chili with cinnamon rolls. And
never had that happen before.
This beer was a hot sauce, barrel-aged chili and cinnamon roll pastry sour. So it was a bourbon barrel-aged sour with maple syrup, hot sauce, cream cheese, vanilla, and cinnamon. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was shockingly not bad. And you somehow, I don't know how they did it, but they somehow got all of those elements to be part of the, like, it wasn't like you could actually kind of get, like, I got it, you know, like it was one of those beers. It's like, okay, am I actually like, this is just going to be, it's going to taste kind of just weird or whatever. It's like, okay, no, I actually get what they're going for with this. I can get all the ingredients. And they also coated the rim with a little cinnamon sugar or something, I think. And it was just like, okay, this is insane. I would not get a pint of this, but I get it. So yeah, there's been a lot of fun, you know, different styles. A lot of the time it's with sours. I feel, you know, stouts sometimes, but I feel like sours are the one that tends to really get crazy. I had a pumpkin pie cheesecake sour once in North Carolina. You know, I had tequila barrel aged sours. I've had, you know, had it all. But that's the other thing that'll get me to get it on the flight is like, oh, I haven't had that before. I guess I need to try it just to see. I probably won't like it, but you know, I got to try it.
Well, you've been to Cincinnati here,
Hmm.
so even though they're based on the Kentucky side, now they do have a location that's downtown, but Braxton
Yep.
Brewing.
Hmm.
So they team up with graders every year. So they do like the blueberry cheesecake, sour, or key lime
Yeah.
pie. So I don't
Mhm.
know if you had any of those when you were through before, but always kind of interesting. And they get their fans behind them that look forward to each year them coming
I
out
don't
with
think I
something.
had any of those, but I did
Yeah,
go to Braxton in on the northern Kentucky side when I passed through once.
yeah,
So I've been to Cincinnati twice now. Most recently, it's been a few years though at this point. So
yeah.
hopefully I can get back. Brink is one of my all-time favorites. I love Brink Brewing.
Brink does
But
a really good
you have
job. Yeah,
amazing beers.
one of the ones, and I don't know because I've been away for like I said 3 years since we had moved to Baltimore. But before we left, one of the more underrated ones, and we had a few of the guys that have other YouTube channels that came in that I'm friends with a few years ago that I took them to a street side brewing.
Mhm.
Very, very underrated and some great beers
I
they're
have
pumping out.
one of my close beer friends, David, lives that's his neighborhood brewery, and I have not gotten there yet. And he
Yeah.
bugs me about getting there. So if I ever get there, I'll have to let you know.
Yeah, yeah. We have to
We
know
can all
anytime
meet
you
up
get
there.
near
'Cause
Cincinnati,
I've
you
been
gotta let me
to, I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
I've been to so many great ones there because you already mentioned Urban Artifacts, Ryan Geist, Mad Tree, Listerman's. I did go to, Taft's is obviously now closed, but
Yeah.
there's been so many good breweries down there in the Cincinnati area for sure.
Yeah. I mean you get
Sonder, I haven't been to Sonder yet, but I know Sonder makes good beer down
Sonder does
there.
really good. Fretboard does really
Fret
good.
beer, they're
Um,
loggers. They're loggers.
Darkness is another one that's really
Mhm.
solid on the Kentucky side in Bellevue. Wooden Cast does a really good job as well. So, I mentioned Mount Carmel earlier. There's just so many, and it's just like,
Well,
yeah, I
I've got a
mean,
small Cincinnati section in the book, but I'm hoping that maybe in the updated version in a couple years it'll be even bigger.
yeah. So you need to come down at a time when we do Oktoberfest here too, because we have the second biggest Oktoberfest behind Munich
Mhm.
in September, and so you can actually, you won't be going to those breweries, but Inger and all them come over with their beers and stuff, which is pretty cool. So you get a lot
Yeah.
of the good German type beer that's in town, but then you're able to go around to Cincinnati and hit the different breweries and stuff like that, or even just take like they have like the brew bus where it takes you like 4 or 5 breweries, 50 West and Street, all these other ones that are around here. So great opportunity. So Cincinnati, the history of it, and I think you would also like they have the underground tours if you didn't get a chance to do that before. So Cincinnati was built also above old subway system. They
Mhm.
never really fully put in the subway, but during times of prohibition, they used to run stuff underground to get around the different areas. So you can basically get around all through Cincinnati through these underground passageways. Um, Back in the time when they had like the mob type run and stuff. In fact, Newport, Kentucky, that you would have been next to Covington where Braxton is, the one street, Monmouth Street, used to be the strip where you like Frank Sinatra would play over there in Newport, Kentucky, and the mobsters would come in. So it has that mobster history around it too. But then we come through Cincinnati, you had a lot of the different breweries that were here because it was illegal. They were running stuff underground through the different tunnels and stuff. So it's really cool. If you ever come back, the tunnel tours are something I think you would find fascinating for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. Well, I mean, and obviously me being in Milwaukee, Cincinnati and Milwaukee have a lot in common when it comes to really being cities that were built, on brewing.
Mhm.
St. Louis is another Midwest city that, similarly has that. And the repurposing. I know Milwaukee, between Pabst and Schlitz, like a lot of those campuses have been completely repurposed at this point, which is
Yeah.
really cool that they've used those old buildings. But yeah, I mean, Cincinnati, the history there is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes to beer, so it is. That's another underrated. I mean, so many of the Midwest cities I feel like are underrated when it
Yeah.
comes to craft beer. They're overlooked for the San Diegos, the Portlands, the Ashevilles. They're not viewed in the Portland at the same level. But I mean, Midwest is making just as good a beer in a lot of cases
Oh, we're making some
as the
great beer.
coasts.
Yeah, and there's been some past things they've run, like Smart Asset and a few things that ran different stuff on beer cities. Cincinnati's come
Mhm.
up like top 5 and sometimes the top 1 for places to even get beer. And not just because of the beer they have flowing around, but also just the price point. The price point is kind of crazy. I have friends around the country that see what I pay for some stuff on beer. And it's just
Oh yeah,
like you cannot believe that what I'm getting there. So I
I'm
have
the
one of the
same exact way whenever I'm around here. Like, I buy a lot of my beer from Third Space Brewing and Lakefront Brewery here because I get 6-packs for $9.99 of really amazing beers that have won GA. Like some of them have won GABF medals and everything. $9.99 for a 6-pack. You
yeah.
can't find that if you're in San Diego. And I know because I was just in San Diego and I was just in the Bay Area and I've lived in Seattle and I've lived in Oregon. I can tell you it's very hard to find quality beer at those kind of prices if you live in those states.
Yeah, if you live, yeah. And so there's some spots around there where I actually get like cases for like $12.99.
Yeah.
Just because some places had to get rid of it. And it's like, being a beer nerd, you're always checking dates and everything is still legit on it. It's just they have to move stuff along. And I got like one time it was from New Holland, and it was one of their dark ales. It wasn't like the Dragon series. It was Cabin Fever. I think it was their brown ale. $12.99 a case. I was like, you can actually hold this for a while. It was like 8%. You don't have to like, you're within the days, but they had to move their volume along. So it was kind of crazy on some of the things you can find. But coming through the area, definitely would love to get you back down here. When you go to some of the breweries, and we kind of talk about all the upside and stuff, but like, what are some of the things, if there have been anything, to kind of turn you off at some of the breweries? Like, what are some things, and you don't have to say any names like that, but like there's some things that you may pick up or you'll notice, and it's just like,
I mean,
they don't know what they're doing there, they don't know what they're doing there. And like, it's like,
I mean, first and foremost, obviously it comes down to the beer. Because I talk about the full experience being part of it. If you have, am I allowed to swear on here? I don't know.
Oh yeah.
If you have shit beer,
Yeah.
right now, and I can tell you, there's been only a handful of, like, I occasionally maybe won't fully finish a flight, if it's maybe my third or fourth brewery, I'm like, okay, but there have been a handful of times where I'm like, this beer is so putrid, I'm not going to waste my liver on this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to. This is absolutely awful. Where it's like you have all the off flavors, and it's just like, okay. And there's been one or two of those places that, on top of having crap beer, had a crap atmosphere where it's like, okay, I feel like I'm drinking in like someone's garage that wasn't like, that had like some old couches in it, and it's like, it's cool if you're like hanging out with your friends, I guess, but if the beer was really good, then it's cool. The beer is really bad. Yeah, no, this is bad. So it's like, it's one of those places like the vibe can be, if the beer's really good, it can make any vibe cool.
Yeah.
But, if the beer's bad, then it's like, okay, I would say though, other than that, there isn't necessarily an aesthetic that would put me off of a beer, like, or off of a brewery. I obviously prefer it if a brewery has something about it that kind of makes it a little more unique. I've been to a lot of business park and strip mall breweries. And some of them at least, have a really cool theme, with all the decor and the beer names, and, they have events going on, and, they make it feel like a more complete experience. And I've also been to some that, are bare bones, very basic, and that's fine. But I also feel like it's hard to get people to come back to a brewery if you're relying solely on the beer and your beer is more kind of average, because especially, if you're talking in a place, like a Denver or a San Diego or an Nashville, where there's just, you throw a rock and you hit a brewery. There's only so many breweries that can be in that top 5 to 10% in beer quality in terms of the top beers. And that next, between 50 to 20%, whatever that percentage is kind of in the middle, you got to be able to differentiate yourself somehow. And so I feel like the worst thing a brewery can be is boring, honestly. Like, if you're just very bland, and I'm not saying that, because people may hear that and be like, oh, like you're talking about like an amber ale. No, I love all styles of beer. I'm not talking about like the styles of beer. I'm talking about like the experience when you're visiting the brewery, where it's a most basic bar and some high top tables, a chalkboard menu, and, and there's nothing else going on in the tap room besides maybe some board games in the corner. It's like, you got to have more to draw people in and keep them there. And food can play a part of that. Events can play a part of that. A strong theme can play a part of that. But whatever it is, you got to have something to draw people in. Because again, you can rely solely on your beer, and that does work for some breweries because they're phenomenal at it. But not every brewery can do that. It's just not possible. So that's where it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do to make sure people are still coming to support your business? So that's been my personal experience. There are breweries that I'm like, okay, like there are other favorites, but like I would drink this beer again. You know, there's only, you know, there are definitely breweries where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't drink this again. But, you know, it's all about, you know, I guess, yeah, I'm rambling now a little bit.
No.
But the gist of it is, if you're not making that top echelon beer, you know, for me, it's just be unique, you know, have something that brings people in.
Yeah, I mean, you got to, I think, create the atmosphere. And I think sometimes where it's, you go to some breweries and the beer can be good still, but it's kind of like the service can be off, or the attitude feel can be off, right? So it might not be just the beer. It just may feel like, you know, they're kind of half-assing going through stuff. So sometimes that could throw people off as well. So I'm just kind of curious what kind of things, you know,
Yeah.
because I've been in some spots and it's just like the people are pretty involved. And I've been in somewhere it's kind of like,
I guess that is one thing I should have mentioned. Staff. Like if you have a great staff, that can make a difference. And if you have a unengaged staff that doesn't
or
know
untrained
that doesn't know anything about the beer, doesn't know anything about the brewery, you know, isn't serving it properly, then that obviously contributes to that as well. So yeah, 100%. That is a very good point, Rod. I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's what I kind of see sometimes, because it's like sometimes we go to a brewery and I'll notice something is off. My wife is just like, "Don't say anything."
Yeah.
Don't say anything.
Well, and depending on your personality, too.
Yeah.
Breweries can do a really good job with an aesthetic and a vibe that will make some people like push back on it, like that won't like it. You know, I think I've been to some like super dark, like some heavy metal breweries that are super dark and, you know, and very tight and, you know, and they got loud music playing and, you know, and other ones that are very modern and open and, you know, have fancy food. And depending on your personality and your likes and dislikes, you know, I can find myself in enjoying pretty much any type of tap room if it's done properly and done well. But depending on if you have personal preferences, I mean, I do still, you're going to have tap room aesthetics that you like more than others. There's going to be things about certain tap rooms that you like more than another person. So yeah, I mean, that's the whole part of this is finding what you like, but also understanding that not everyone likes what you like and that other people will like what other, and that's one thing I try to talk about in the book is the fact that this is my experience. And that's why I try to remain kind of unbiased. And I try to paint a picture of these brewery scenes and these breweries so that you're able to go and make your own decisions about these places. Cause that's important to me is that you don't say, oh, I'm going to this brewery only because he says to, or I'm not going to go to this brewery, you know, because he doesn't mention it. Like,
yeah,
it's your own craft beer journey. Like, you know, like make sure that you're not relying on someone else to dictate the beers that you drink and don't drink.
Right. And it's the same, like when I review beers, you know, and I give stuff for what I might not like about it or that or anything. But the whole thing is, don't just take it from what I'm saying on here. If you dig the different stuff I've been mentioning, still give it a try. But it just might be not my overall preference for this type of style. But if you like these types, like for instance, I'm not a huge, and everybody that watches the channels, I'm not a huge shandy fan. But I know a lot of people that love shandies. They love that lemonade feel. They love everything that comes through. And they're like, that's all there for you, you know? So
yeah,
if I'm doing a review on a shandy, I don't go in and just, you know, slam the shandy or whatever like that, or even I point out what I'm getting out of all that kind of stuff. And if I think it might be too sweet or not too sweet or however it may come across. And then ultimately you're going to make that decision. But I'm just trying to give you the notes and stuff to kind of look for when you go out there. And I think that's what everybody appreciates. And speaking of appreciate you there, Keith, as well.
Yeah,
enjoying the discussion. Makes me want to check out a new brewery this weekend.
I mean, that's the highest praise right there. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. As I said, like that's what brings me joy is inspiring, you know, people to go out and check out breweries or around their area or around a new area. So, you know, it's been a lot of fun to get to share this with people. And yeah, I mean, that's 100%. That's it right there. Going out, checking out a new brewery, 100%.
Yeah, and it's like being back where we're at now in this part of Cincinnati, for instance. One of the ones I didn't mention earlier, but like Mad Tree Brewing, that's doing some great things. And they're put up a new location. They're like 20 minute walk, 5-minute by car. I'm not going to walk. We just had a big snowstorm come in, so I'll drive over there. But talking with them, we got stuff we're going to set up to actually provide some different coverage on some of the stuff they're doing out there. So, but you go to Mad Tree, it's definitely a different experience than just having a Mad Tree beer here, which I can still enjoy at home and tell you about. but to be in that environment, it just changes things out. So it's
that
always
is a
good to
really
get
cool.
out
That
there.
was one. I think their newer location was the one I went to. We would have stopped through there in 22. I want to
Yeah,
say,
out here on
and
Madison and
that was
Oakley. Yeah.
oh, really the flow indoor to outdoor there is really neat too. They got a great outdoor space. It was kind of cold when I was there, but just to see it, and I was like, oh man, this place is gonna be popping once
Oh,
it
it
warms
definitely
up
is.
here.
Yeah, and they get like a lot of they do a lot. Cincinnati's gotten to because they have FC Cincinnati now, but it's become a little bit of a soccer area, not just for the U.S. teams, but also for the teams in the Premier League. So
Yeah,
they show all the games on there on TV, and they get a lot of people come in from their different groups and stuff like that and everything. So they're opening up another location called Parks and Rec, which is going to be in the Blue Ash area.
okay.
They're very big into environmental stuff, especially with planting of trees. So that's going to be more of a parks type idea off that concept with the trees.
Hence
And
the
all that stuff
name.
they're doing.
You
Yes,
know,
that's the name,
that's
right?
very
Yeah,
smart. You know,
very
very smart of them. They're like, you know what? We're called Mad Tree. We should
Yeah,
probably get into planting trees. That'd give us some good publicity. You know.
yeah. And the cool thing with them, and this is what I talk about when people have to go out at some point to check out breweries, they've got beers on tap that you won't see unless you go to the brewery.
100%.
When I went to Baltimore, everybody was used to Guinness, just what they see in the store. When I went to Baltimore, Guinness, they actually had like IPA flights. They had other specialized flights. Like you would never see it. They're just only done at the brew house.
Yeah.
And you could buy them there to go, but you'll never see them in the store. But unless you went to that environment, you would have never known they were put out there.
That reminds me too, you know, we talked about, you know, small breweries to big breweries. And one of my favorite things is visiting the large breweries that, you know, are kind of, you know, the backbone of what built craft beer. Places like Sierra Nevada, Dogfish Head, Stone, Boston Beer Company, New Belgium, and Cigar City, you know, all these big breweries going there and, you know, still getting maybe one of the beers in my flight being the flagship beer. You know, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, you know, Allagash getting Allagash White, you know, Dogfish Head getting one of the, you know, 60-minute IPA, but then getting to try all the stuff that they're doing that isn't in distribution, that you don't get to just try, you know, all over the country. Because, you know, those beers that they ship all around, obviously those are the beers that enable them to do cool stuff. But going to these huge breweries and getting to do this, seeing what they're just doing for fun is one of the coolest parts about traveling to those kind of places. Because you're like, oh, you know, you're going to Sierra Nevada. Why? Like, you can just get their beer, you know, you can get a variety pack of their beer pretty much anywhere. It's like,
right.
Yeah. But you can also try a whole bunch of cool stuff there. And in Sierra Nevada's case, you know, especially both their locations, but especially the one in North Carolina, amazing experience in terms of the tap room, the atmosphere, the setting out in the, you know, with the woods. They have an amphitheater, the food, all of it. So, you know, you're losing that if you're just relying on going to the, you know, your local liquor store to pick up a 6-pack of pale ale.
Right.
Which is not wrong to do that. If that's all you can do, go and support, you know, whatever breweries you want to. But if you're able to go and visit those breweries, it gives you, like you said, I think we've already said this a few times, it gives you that new appreciation and a full brand new, like a kind of picture of that brewery. Yeah.
And knock on wood, I'll be at Sierra Nevada here in July. We got a beer tuber get together down there. So
nice. In Asheville.
It's actually going to be out of Greenville, South Carolina, but it'll be the one in Asheville.
Oh, in Asheville. So you'll be going up there.
Yeah, we're going up there for like a day or something.
Greenville's got a little underrated beer scene there too. One of my favorites was sadly closed, but they've got a nice little brewery scene, you know, kind of bubbling up there. It's a fun little city there in Greenville.
Yeah, and hopefully some of the ones that were hit by Halloween will be back up and going a little bit too with all the stuff.
That was speaking of Asheville's another place that we lived for 3 months.
Yeah.
And so I got close with, you know, the brewing scene there. And two of my favorite breweries there were ones that were not just like hit, but like wiped out. Oh, wiped out, like building, everything gone.
Wow.
New Origin and Zillicoa were two that were just devastated by it. And I think I saw something about some of them maybe brewing some beers at, you know, at other breweries.
Kind of gypsy brewing now. Yeah.
Maybe hopefully trying to figure something out, but I know that at times it seemed like insurance might not cover all of it. And even if they weren't fully gone, I know a lot of other breweries dealt with severe flooding and other issues. So I'm trying to be optimistic about it because I know a lot of great people down there. And that is one beer scene that I am thinking about heavily, the last several months. And
Yeah.
because there is, I mean, that is honestly prior to Hurricane Helene, that would have been if you had asked me one city, because I have awards for best big beer city and best small beer city. And I classified them as small and had them, they were one of my
For
winners.
Greenville, yeah.
Or
yeah.
no, Asheville.
Oh, Asheville.
Yeah,
Asheville, yeah, small. Okay.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
I would think they would be one of the bigger ones because everybody knows
No, because
Asheville.
Asheville's still, because if you compare them to Denver or San Diego, they're small.
Okay.
But yeah, so I mean, they were just, they are my all-time favorite, beer city. And I mean, if we are going back to Greenville, though, like I said, because I was just thinking Asheville in my head because we were talking about Sierra Nevada. But yeah, Greenville, great beer scene as well. And yeah, I don't know if any of the breweries there had major issues. They very well may have, because that's kind of the same general region.
Yeah, they had some because our person that's setting up the event, he's actually down in Greenville, Nutmeg to Palmetto. So I know like where he was actually at in Greenville, like when it happened, like at one point on his own street, he couldn't even get out either way because of the water and everything like that. But there was some of the stuff around that had been affected. And I was on the line, like I was sharing some of the stories on the Facebook page, some of the other breweries that were kicking in and helping out. And that's a cool thing about the community in beer.
100%.
They all seem to back each other when they can. It's competition, yes, but then again, not as much as what people would think. It's not like cutthroat, like Coke versus Pepsi. It's more helping each other out. And now we're seeing some of the small breweries get together to form their own thing. Yeah. So they're not being taken over by some of the bigger companies. So
well, and in Asheville, one of the breweries downtown, Dissolver, they were my 800th brewery visit, rolled out the red carpet. Awesome guys. Mm-hmm. One of them actually came on my podcast. They were not directly like impacted by the flooding, but they actually pretty much shut down and for multiple weeks became kind of a community hub for the donation and distribution of essential items for the community.
That's nice.
Which, I mean, just amazing work by them. And Asheville is a very community focused place because if you go to downtown Asheville and around there, you're not going to find any chain. Like there are, like if you go to the outskirts, but downtown Asheville is all local businesses. Yeah. And it's all local. Like it's all local people. And so the community rallying, behind each other is a really cool thing down there. And I'm hoping to see continued rebuilding.
Yeah. And that's the feel you get from everything I see. Speaking of breweries, first year without having Anchor Christmas. Mm-hmm. Thought we might get it back possibly because the founder of Chobani was going to try to help, but they couldn't get it done in time. Any thoughts back on that? Anything you're hoping to see them back up and going towards the end of this year? I mean, do you feel?
I'm just in kind of a wait and see kind of mood with a lot of these breweries because I know we talked about kind of before we started the fact that this was the first year where we saw more closures than openings since craft beer started to take off. It's been multiple decades at this point. And a lot of breweries, I know some local breweries here that have closed that are, maybe going to try to, do something out. And I'm just trying to let it ride out and see what happens with a lot of this stuff. I don't have enough knowledge on the background deals and how the business aspects of it work to try to make any predictions. Yeah. I'm not in the, the crystal ball projections job of if I'm talking hyper local, I can tell you, there was actually just a closure here that I, kind of two closures that I kind of predicted, that I kind of knew about, that I've been talking to folks about. But overall, like with stuff with like Anchor, I think that at some point it may come back in some form. It's not going to ever be what it was, obviously. Right. And I think that's what people need to realize. It's not going to be the same. More and more breweries I've seen that we have a couple locally here that are trying to pivot where there are two that one closed kind of mid 2024. One was closing at the end of 2024 here. And they're now, the owners are kind of coming together for a joint venture kind of deal called Last Chance Brew Pub or something, or Last Ditch Brew Pub or something like that, trying to combine resources. And it's a tough time out there. I think people are trying to figure their way out and, kind of have to just wait and see how things shake out here in the next, I think this next year, especially the next 6 months, it'll be interesting if this trend continues with all the closures.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, to one point before I get to the other one, but like you were talking about have to wait and see. They may come back. And it makes me think of like Green Flash, right? When Green Flash went,
Mhm.
but then Green Flash came back, and it just wasn't the same feel. It wasn't the same appeal as what
Yeah.
it was before they had went through that. And I almost feel the same way about Smutty Nose. Like they came back, but it's kind of like you're not really doesn't have the air around them they had previously before they had kind of had to restructure some stuff. But in thinking like with that number being released, like the number, looking at that numbers to me, it's just a number, right? Because in the majority of the time, from what I see, and you may see the same or you may see it different, if 90% of breweries close, almost like 95%, another brewery steps in and takes their spot, right? So
Yeah.
usually there's people waiting in the wings to kind of do stuff. And being maybe because my background has been in the business world for so many years, it's like any industry you look at has to go through a level and type impact, right? So it's not necessarily like some people are thinking, oh, did the craft beer bubble finally burst? Like, no, I don't think it's a burst.
It's just
I think
more
it's
of a
it's more of a restructuring.
it was
leveling out.
unsustainable growth. It was unsustainable growth for many,
Right.
many years. Because it's obviously like it was kind of going up, and then from like, you know, there was about a, you know, a 6 to 10 year period where it went from like, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 breweries up to almost 10,000, you know, and it just skyrocketed. And obviously that curve was not going to continue at that trajectory. And so at some point there was going to be this leveling off. There was going to be some kind of, you know, breweries where it's either A, the beer's just not good enough, or B, the people running the brewery aren't good enough at business. Because that's the other side of the coin, is that people like, oh, this brewery made really good beer. How could it possibly fail? It's like, well, that's obviously a really big part of it, but people also have to run a successful business to operate a brewery as well on top of that. So, you know, there are multiple kind of ways that it can go wrong, you know, just a bad business deal, whatever the case may be. So yeah, that is something that I fully agree with, that we're not seeing the end of craft beer. The doom and gloom that we've seen in headlines is a bit too pronounced. Like, it is okay to feel sad with all the closures, because people are losing, you know, sometimes their dreams of owning a brewery, people that lose their jobs, all of that is very, very true. And you cannot just simply overlook that kind of stuff. Right. But to say that the industry as a whole is all of a sudden failing is very misguided in my eyes. Mm-hmm. And just plain wrong, to be honest. I think the industry is certainly still there. It is just going to slightly, like you said, kind of level out, and it has to find its footing in a different manner, because it's not going to have that same excitement and that same, you know, kind of trajectory that they are finding now, kind of this middle ground kind of footing.
Right. And I think that it to a little bit of an aspect, I think it's gotten to, and we'll talk about this here in a second, a little bit of a piling on kind of build up, because you've had all the stories come out about the people not drinking as much. There's always like something coming out, and then now
apparently Gen Z doesn't drink beer or something either.
Yeah,
apparently that's the thing too.
Which is funny, because like in my company, we get together a couple times a year, like for everybody comes into the home office, and we go out and we socialize. Every young person there is asking me what beers to drink. Like everyone that's in that category you say they don't drink is always asking me what beers to try, and they're trying beers all the time. So I don't know who's getting polled in these polls where it's saying people aren't drinking, but the people I see are actually still drinking out there. But it's just interesting, because it's kind of like all this stuff is just the maturation. I mean, we talked about this on the show with other times, so you have the influence that comes in from the states that have marijuana legal, right? So you got people that are going to pull from that one. You got some of the people that are living a more healthier lifestyle. So with, you know, we got the non-alcoholic type stuff. You got things like that are happening,
because that's become trendier too.
That's becoming trendier too. You've got some of the health type. It's just all these different things that are taking place.
I mean, seltzers. And all the mixed and the canned cocktails.
The ready to drink market has started to take a little bit of a bite, and you got like the spirits doing their different things. So all this stuff is. So I think it's just all part of this. What happened, but in business, you adapt. That's what companies do. No, if you go to any industry, none of them stay the same. The stuff that Best Buy does now wasn't the same stuff they were doing when they came out 20 years ago, right? Everybody changes, they adapt. Apple stores change and adapt. All these different places wherever you go to, because you have to meet the people where they're at.
And a lot of the breweries, like two of the things we just said, I have seen in the last couple of years more and more breweries producing NA options and producing seltzers. That has been one of those trends that we've seen. You know, and I think it goes better for breweries that if you were not an NA brewery to kind of begin with, breweries like Lakefront here in Milwaukee, the big one that's been around since the 80s, that has very established beers and beer brands, they are producing NAs of those brands, some of those brands. I think that is something that's going to resonate much more than like a brewery that has opened in the last 5 years and is trying to then start to do NA stuff. It's like, if you have a brand that is already familiar and then you do an NA of it, people are going to recognize that more so as an option, I feel, because it's a brand they're familiar with, but then it's like, oh, you have an NA option of that now. So, I think that's something that has definitely been a trend. And I think it's going to be one that we continue to see more and more breweries diversifying. And I'm not talking, like, obviously not beer styles, but actual different products. The CBD stuff, I know, breweries do the CBD kind of drinks as well.
THC drinks. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another potential outlet depending on the state you're in. So, like you said, breweries are adapting. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. And it's exciting to see how they are expanding their market, essentially.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, for any business in any industry, that's what you have to do. You have to be able to change. I mean, I'm 55. Stuff that I've seen when I was 25 for some companies that are still around are not marketing the same way today they were back then. They had to change to survive, basically. But I was going to ask you about the NA thing. But before I do that, as we're kind of talking about the gloom and doom type thing, do we want to touch on this report that got released by the Surgeon General? Because I have thoughts on that out there. Kind of curious what you were kind of seeing out there, because it's kind of like, okay, you want to kind of pick that, and every year there's always studies that come out doing this. So there's also good benefits, there's these bad benefits. Now we say, no, can't. Like, I feel like from what just came out, with all the processed food and stuff that people eat, there's a lot more things I think that are more concerning about that than actually beer.
Yeah.
That might be linked into someone saying this might be linked to cancer. Well, you said 1 in 6 people might have.
What isn't linked to cancer at this point?
1 in 2 people that drive a car might get cancer. Yeah. I mean, that's just
and I do think that there is, I am one that says, I drink often, but I don't drink a lot, is what I say.
Right.
I like 2 beers is pretty much
and moderate. Yeah.
Mostly and even then, like, it's, most of the time it's only one. Like, I drink a lot of nights, but I usually only have 1 beer. And even then, maybe I could maybe stand to, drink a few less nights, drink a beer a few less nights. But overall, I feel like if you're doing it in moderation, anything in moderation isn't going to be terrible. I guess not terrible, not anything either, but beer, especially like an alcohol, if you're being smart about it and doing it in moderation, like, something is going to kill you at some point. If you love beer, it's like, if it takes 6 months, it's just like, to me, that there are so many other vices that are more detrimental to your health. And like you said, there are so many different reports and studies that come out all the time.
Right.
That I kind of take everything with a grain of salt. And it's not to say that you ignore the health things. Obviously, if you drink excess alcohol, it has an impact on your body in a multitude of ways. So it's not to say that, oh, you go and drink, a 6-pack a night, like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. Like, no, like, you do have to be smart about it, and you have to understand what it's doing to your body. But to just say, because of this one study, I'm no longer going to drink beer, like, to me, that's kind of silly, because at the end of the day, we all do things that, in the long run may not be the healthiest choice, but to try to avoid everything that isn't healthy for you, God bless you if you try to do that, because that's not for me. I mean, I want to enjoy myself, and I want to enjoy my life. And one of those enjoyments is drinking beer, and getting to be with people and visiting breweries. So I'm going to continue to do that in the same manner that I've been doing it, which is, again, in moderation. So that's just been my approach, and the Surgeon General isn't going to scare me off of that anytime soon.
No, and I mean, you look at beer, like, we can all make our own beer, again, thanks to Jimmy Carter, the home brewing, but we can get our own grains, we can do the malts, and we can do the hops and all that. Like, the stuff that you're putting in these grocery stores, a lot of times they're getting processed and
Oh
in
yeah,
labs, and when
100%.
you read the ingredients and it's got like these different things you can't even pronounce on the box, I'd be
Yep.
more worried about that kind of stuff that people are ingesting. You know, if you're out there getting some rice-a-roni or hamburger helper or whatever it may be, and you're looking at it, you're seeing all these dyes and all this kind of stuff, I'd be like wondering more about that than worrying about what's in a beer when there's like 4 ingredients right here, 4 ingredients make a beer.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
literally. I mean, you got your malts there. It's basically just like you're basically just getting some bread. I mean,
Right.
essentially that isn't that, liquid bread. I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
is. So, and some of them, if you do some of the sours, it's basically like a serving of fruit also,
Right.
so I mean, there you go. We're if we talk about it long enough and think about it long enough, we're going to have the whole food pyramid figured out by the end of the discussion. So
4 food groups, 4
I
food
do actually,
groups.
I know, speaking of unique beers, I know a brewery in New Hampshire that once brewed a beer with hold on, I need to look because I don't want to mess this up. With meat. So that can be our meat portion of it here.
Well, I know there was a brewery that did it out in Colorado with Rocky Mountain oysters too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, oysters are definitely a big one here. Or they once there was a Earth Eagle Brewings. They also do Groots, and they brewed a brown ale with beef offal, specifically the heart and liver of a pig or something like that, or a cow. No, a cow, I think. So yes, and they had to. I remember I asked them, and they had to have a very large thing, like a sign kind of next to it, so that vegetarians and vegans knew,
vegans,
no, this beer actually does, we'd used meat in it. And fish, like I said, we had the shrimp. Man,
we've had oyster and stuff too.
We got to figure out vegetables. No, I've had carrots in beer before. I've had carrots.
I've had beets. I've had beets.
Yep, I've had beets.
Yeah.
So I mean, we pretty much got it on lock, I think. Dairy, obviously, milk stouts, lactose.
Yeah.
We got the pyramid, baby. We got the whole thing there. We're ready to go.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm having a full meal right there. I'm good to go. Yeah. But in touching on the NA beers, so is that something you're starting to actually, when you go to get flights and you visit places, do you try the NA beers? Or you kind of getting the perspective on those at all, or?
Not in my flights for first visiting breweries. I've tried a couple. It's not something I have really done a whole lot of. I'm glad to see it though as an option for several reasons. But I have not myself, so I can't pretend to speak on the quality. But from what I've heard from people, it varies. But I've heard really good things about some of the NA options here in Milwaukee.
Okay.
And I have family members that are recovered alcoholics that don't drink. And so, that may be a possibility down the road. And also just for people that are out and about and you're like, oh, I want to still be social and drinking a beer, but I'm several beers deep and I don't want to drink anymore. Well, that provides another, option for people. And I think that's great. And again, as we were talking about earlier, anything that helps the brewery diversify its portfolio and be successful with a new market, to me, I'm all good with. That's why I'm fine if breweries are making a seltzer, or if they're, making the canned cocktails, or, I know a couple breweries that are, also open. They also started distilleries. Whatever is going to help you be successful, I am all for. Even if it's not a product that I myself am going to enjoy, I am happy that you have found a way to expand your brand to other people so that I can keep enjoying your beer. So that is always the way I look at it. I would never be upset. Like I know some people like, oh, I go to this brewery and a third of it's now, seltzers. It's like, okay, well, that probably means that they're selling a lot of seltzers,
right,
and that's helping to keep them open so that you can keep going and buying your beer. So that is my take, on that situation.
Okay. Yeah, I've actually been introducing more of the NA stuff. I'm actually one of the ambassadors for Go Brewing out of Chicago, so I share a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And they've actually blown up with the NA stuff. I've done some of the athletic.
Athletic is the big one.
I just did a review on Rationale and their Kolsch, which was really surprising. Their Kolsch was pretty decent for being a non-alcoholic. I mean, they were easy to sit there and throw those back. Like if I was like at a barbecue or picnic or something like that, everything, and just wanted to not get tanked and wanted to have something around the drink rather than soda or whatever. Yeah, those would be easy ones to knock back. Surprisingly, I just released the one today on the Heineken Zero. That was surprising because that one, I would drink that more than I would actually drink Heineken. So I never thought I would say that about a non-alcoholic beer, but their non-alcoholic actually rivaled the beer itself. And
Yeah.
they'd be like, and I've had other people that have said that too, that have tried the 0%, how surprised they were. So maybe they need to take alcohol in their stuff and just start selling that more.
Well, I mean, I think Athletic is partially responsible for all these other breweries starting to do NA stuff.
Oh yeah, they opened the door for sure.
Athletic was what, because they became what, a top 5? What are they, a top 15, top 20?
I think they might be top 10 now. I believe
whatever
now.
they are.
Yeah,
Their success with NA beer is what kind of opened the eyes of brewers and being like, oh, there is a market for this. And if we produce a quality, option of one of our beers in NA format, people are going to drink it. So I think Athletic is definitely one of the foremost, influences in terms of the NA kind of push here with craft beer.
Yeah, I mean, they changed the game from what we had been used. Well, you were probably not even born yet or a baby, but I was used to back in the day, which would have been the Sharps and the Old Duels and the St. Pauli non-alcoholic. Athletic definitely changed that to make something, okay, this is actually not bad, pretty decent. I can actually enjoy this. And that opened up other opportunities. So it does provide a nice gateway for those that can't drink beer or don't want to drink beer, but want that beer fix and opportunity, or some of those ones that have been a little bit more health conscious. So I even saw one of them versus like, some of your sodas or non-alcohol or diet type stuff, and they almost stack up as well against them too. So it's a good alternative. So I definitely keep trying some of those, but I know we got to head out here pretty soon, but I was going to ask you, I'll do it this way since we're a little up on time. As far as the 50 states, what would you have for your top 5 states that you visited that have impressed you, and then what would be your least 5? So your top 5 and your bottom 5.
You're really gonna do that to me, huh?
I just I got to put it out there for the folks.
Okay. So if you live in one of those states,
and if you're a bottom 5,
book,
if you're a bottom 5, doesn't mean you're bad. It's just there's so many good states doing beer. Yeah,
I already said that every state has got good beer, so I'm safe on that.
I mean, I could drink through all the other half beers, and there's going to be some at the bottom, but there's still going to be other half, and they're still going to be great. So yeah.
I think, obviously they do obviously rely somewhat on sheer number, but in terms of the quality of options, I mean, California has got, in terms of both large breweries that have played a huge part in the growth of craft beer and the new age breweries that have found great success in the quality at different events. California is definitely there. I mean, I could just do all 3 West Coast states, to be honest. I mean, Oregon and Washington. I mean, I'll definitely do California and Oregon, and I would say Colorado because I love Denver, and then Boulder and Fort Collins. I mean, Colorado is amazing. Man, honest, it's gonna be. I might throw North Carolina in there. I know that's not because it's not like one of the traditional state powerhouses, though Asheville's been a traditional city, but Charlotte has a great beer scene. Raleigh-Durham has a really good beer scene in that area. That one might be a borderline one. I don't know, because I mean, you throw in obviously in New England, you have Vermont and Maine,
right?
I'm trying to think without taking too long. What if there's anything I'm like outwardly missing? So I'll for sure say California, Oregon, Colorado are my for sure options. Those 3 I'm confident in putting in there. The other ones I'm less confident in, because obviously when you say per capita, it's Vermont and Maine. Like per capita, Vermont and Maine are pretty much those are pretty untouched. And Massachusetts obviously it has some great stuff too, but I would say in terms of full scope, though, if you're talking options, I guess I'll do North Carolina, and then I'm going to use my 5th pick, and I'll be a homer, and I'm going to say Wisconsin. just because
Okay.
we're top 10 in a lot of the categories. And
you guys drink a lot of beer in Wisconsin.
And I love, yeah, I mean, too much if you look at some of those.
I think your cities are top 10 per capita cities in the country.
Well, and if you look at like the maps of like the top like 20 drunkest counties and like 16 of them are in Wisconsin or something, like we drink too much beer. The worst ones is even tougher though, because I hate, like I said, I've loved beer in all of the states.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say Mississippi is in there. They just don't have many breweries.
They don't have many.
Mississippi is in there. I know we talked about it before. West Virginia is probably on there just because they don't have many breweries, even in their cities. They only have a couple. Like I said, I love the breweries in Charleston, but in terms of a grand scope of the beer scene, it's just not there yet.
Not there yet.
The rest are probably also Southeast. I would maybe say I really liked Arkansas. And I know, so the northwest corner of Arkansas, I've not been to yet. And I know they have a really good beer scene, but like like most of Arkansas does not have much in the way of craft beer.
Okay.
So I guess I would throw that one in there. I don't even want to say, maybe Idaho, maybe there's some solid, but like I might say Idaho. I've been to some good stuff in Wyoming, so I probably won't say them. I think Alabama, because Birmingham has really had a come up here in the last decade with their craft beer. So I don't think I can put
Good Peoples or whatever, Alabama.
Yeah, good people and district, and they've got some really good breweries there in Birmingham. So what have I said? I said Forks. I think I said Mississippi. West Virginia. Idaho, I said in Arkansas.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Oklahoma. There's been some good breweries in Oklahoma. Same with Kansas, but that might have to be. I guess I'll throw South Dakota in there. Maybe I've been to Sioux Falls, but some of the, I guess I'll throw that one. But again, I feel like you could interchange that. There's several kind of in that area. Then, yeah, I guess that's what I'll say. But again. Yeah. I mean, there's good beer to be found everywhere. So if you're in one of those states, please still buy my book. I promise. I mentioned breweries in the book. So, that's what I'll go with.
Yeah. And again, it's not bad states. It's just, we're an opportunity.
You just don't have the same amount of options, essentially, is what it comes down to in a lot of those states. So, and like I said, if you want to find more of my favorites, like I said, the book's got the rundown on my award section of my best breweries that I've been to and best whatever style you like. I've got my best of in those as well. So, it's all, like I said, it's all made up awards, so it doesn't really matter. But, I still had fun with it. So that's what, all good.
Yeah. And again, to check out the book, if you didn't see it earlier, it's pinned in the comments at the top, but there's a link there where you can actually see it on Amazon and as well. So check that out there. So again, not saying bad states, just saying states, someone has to be the bottom.
Yeah.
Right?
And I do have to admit that at this point with my book and like the fact I've covered other things, I have to be comfortable with being a somewhat of a voice, and being able to voice my opinion on things.
Yeah.
Because this book is overall very positive. I don't really talk, I don't talk bad about breweries in the book. But if you message me directly and ask for things and ask specifically about, cities, I will make sure to point you away from certain breweries. I will say that. So
and it's good to know. And then for someone that's going to a brewery, because we were talking about how, some of the styles you kind of pick out. See, when I go to a brewery, I like to personally go the flight route to get a taste of different things. But for me, it's a little different because I'm kind of going to be like that beer geek nerd, kind of get a taste,
100%.
Review,
preaching to the choir.
Yeah, put up my stuff on Untappd, because that's where I put my own notes on Untappd and kind of track stuff. But for someone that's actually going in as a novice or maybe experiencing a new brewery, what would you advise to them, or how they might want to check out the beers? I mean, would it be?
It would still be a flight.
It'd be a flight, but would it be try to get a flight from maybe, because some flights are 3 to 5, but I'll say 5.
Yeah.
Styles. Do you try to say maybe try to get yourself a Pilsner, try to get an IPA, try to get how would you Or
I
would you
mean,
say,
if you are truly novice, I would say you still want to know what the brewery is best known for, so that you're getting, a good example of that, hopefully. But
mhm,
if you're novice, I mean, that's what I did. I mean, I tried lots of different beers, and I also want to preach that if you don't like a beer, don't assume that you're always going to not like that style of beer. And you may
good
try
point.
several of that example and you may not like it, but eventually, if you keep like, your palate is going to grow and adjust. I didn't like West Coast IPAs for a long time, and now I do. And and same thing with lagers. Didn't used to be my favorite style, and now they are.
Mhm,
Your palate is going to grow and adapt, and so giving beers a chance. And I think this is what enabled me to grow my palate and let it adapt, is that I didn't like just hone in and only drink certain things. Like when I was traveling, I was always trying different things. And even if it wasn't necessarily styles that I loved, I was still getting in my flight. And I think that's what enabled my palate to kind of get to what it is now. And um, let yourself not like a beer and let yourself like a beer,
mhm.
even if you're not expecting to. Um, so yeah, definitely get a variety. Even if you feel like, oh, I'm an IPA person, we'll still get that red ale and still get that Pilsner and that stout on that flight, and keep working on, and finding, maybe, because like I said, maybe there's an adjunct that you're really going to like in a beer. Maybe you really
Right.
like raspberry in a sour, whatever the case may be. Um, enabling yourself to continue to try different things is the only way that you're going to be able to grow as a beer drinker. And so that would be my big advice to someone, is to try a variety. And even if you don't like it, keep trying some varieties. Like, you're going to find styles that you really truly don't like, and that's okay. Like, I don't
Exactly.
ever get barley wines in my flights anyway. That's just one thing I just don't like. After all these years, that's just not what I do. I did get one in Alaska still, because that's one of the big styles up there, but it's just not for me. But as I said, a majority of the time, I mean, so many styles, I found examples that I love of that style, even if it wasn't a style I necessarily would have thought was one that I would have loved prior to it. So, you know, keep trying different things and just have fun with it. That's the other thing too, is craft beer is fun, and it's meant to be fun. And I love it. I love visiting a brewery for the first time and the excitement of it, getting to try their stuff for the first time. And so making sure that you're enjoying yourself first and foremost. And if you don't love a beer, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's my big takeaway. It's okay. Like, on to the next one. You're going to find something that you like.
Yeah, and a lot of the breweries, ones I've talked to are brewers in the past. Like they don't expect everybody to like everyone too. I think
No,
sometimes
not at all.
people feel coming with that pressure or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be coded to your palate. You mentioned that about the barley wine. Like I'm a huge barley wine person, but I remember a lot of my some friends. It took a while sometimes for them to become accustomed to barley wine. Right, like
Mm-hmm.
first time they had it, they just hated it. And then over years, their palate would change, it would shift, and you would actually pick up an appreciation for it. When I ended up going there, I said, it's like, yeah, how many do we have? They're like, oh, there's 15 beers on tap. Okay, so 1 through 5 first flight. I'm 6 through 10, 11.
Yeah.
So I kind of just go the number route if I can, or if it's like they're all big ABVs, I
And
might
if
like
that's your
those.
only stop of the night, that's perfect.
That's perfect, right? If I got to do other stuff, like, oh, we'll try this, and this, and I'll try
Yeah.
to note it down. But whatever you think, and also if you do have that experience tender, ask them as well, because they might be able to tell you good stuff. I mean, if someone a good person on the other side of the bar would say, "Well, what do you usually like? What do you usually drink? Give me some
Oh yeah.
examples," and they
Mm-hmm.
can actually tell you what kind of relate to if they're trained, to kind of understand all of that. And a lot of breweries do have people there, but there are a lot of that don't. So, but asking those questions can actually point you in the right direction as well. But and all the stuff that you're kind of doing. Another thing too, like when you do the flight, are you big into cleaning the palate after each one? Like you keep the ice water
I
there
do
after you
try to
finish
keep
the
a
wine?
water with me. I
Okay.
do. I didn't always, but I do try to keep a water with me. Um, and I do try to, most of the time, do it one at a time. I
Yeah.
didn't always, like, early on in my journey, obviously I was still learning. And
Yeah.
I sometimes take sips of different things, just trying different things, going back and forth. But now I mostly try to, I go one beer at a time for the most part. And I know, based on the style, what order I want to do them in. If I have a Pilsner, an IPA, an Imperial Stout, and a wheat ale, I'm not going to start with the Imperial Stout, or the sour, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I do try to do that, but it's never going to be perfect. Obviously,
Yeah.
The only way to perfectly get a picture of a beer is you buy a full pint of it and then you buy a 6-pack to take home, and that's the only beer you like. You really, if you get a full appreciation of a beer, you really got to focus in on that beer. And if you're visiting over 1,000 breweries, you can't try every single beer multiple times. It's just not possible. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles on that instance.
Your liver would be like, will you stop already?
And my wallet too.
And your wallet, yeah. That's one thing, like, when you're kind of doing, I always look at the water being kind of like the ginger with sushi, right? It's there to cleanse the palate in between to bring in the new flavors. But no, it's definitely been great having you on. I know we're up against the time here. And then, with everything going on right now, have you started to be recognized a lot of when you walk into a brewery? Do people recognize you at all? Is that
not all that? It's happened a couple. I would say a couple of times. It's not. I am not famous. By any definition, I would not classify myself as famous. I have I'd have to sell a lot more books before that would happen. I am still pretty low on the totem pole. There are much bigger names in beer journalism than me at this point still. So. It has been fun though. I've gotten to meet a lot of people, a lot of followers, a lot of friends that I've made online. And I've been blessed with getting to do that with my travels. But yeah, if you do ever see me out and about, definitely come up and say hi. Cause like I said, if you're into beer, I love to talk to you. That is for sure.
Yeah, well, I know I Googled you and a lot of stuff's coming up. So, it'll happen more at some point, I'm sure.
We'll see. If you want me to, if anyone listening wants to help me become famous, just go buy my book and review it, and help me beat the Bezos, Amazon algorithm, by getting my book, up there on the bestsellers list. So,
yeah. You'd be walking in like the bar rescue guy.
Exactly.
He's out
there. I'm not as heartless. I wouldn't be able to go with that persona. I'm not that mean of a person. I wouldn't be able to do it. They'd have to pick somebody else.
Well, yeah, that would be funny to have you out there like a John Taffer shutting stuff down.
I could be behind the scenes telling the person what to say, I guess, in terms of the tap room and everything. But otherwise, like I'll just be like in his earpiece telling him what to say, so I don't have to do it in person.
But before we wrap up, any other projects you're working on right now, or is just kind of rolling?
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm working with Greg on the on the stuff here, Badger Beer Hour / Badger Beer Report, and covering the Wisconsin beer scene. We got some exciting stuff coming up with that. Because like I said, we're home now permanently, so getting to be more in depth with the Wisconsin beer scene has been a lot of fun for me. Because I have a lot of breweries, a lot of people here that I enjoy. And when we were traveling, obviously, I was not here to, really be in tune with the beer scene the same way that I am now. So that has been an exciting development on my end. But otherwise, going to be continuing to push the book. I have a lot more events coming up here across the Midwest, and we'll see what happens with that. If you can follow me on Instagram, like you said, at brewery_travels. I'm still hanging on Twitter at brewery travels. And I'm on Blue Sky now, Brewery Travels. And if you're lost and you need a link, besides Googling it, all of my profiles have links for the book as well. If you go to any of those places, and otherwise reach out to me directly and I will for sure point you in the right direction. Because I'm more than happy to share that. And that's been the biggest blessing of this whole book thing, is finally getting it into the hands of people and seeing people take their picture with it and being excited to read it. That has been a true joy for me, for sure.
No, it's definitely, I got to think, an awesome experience there. And for those of you watching here or listening back on the podcast, I will place the links in the description as well, where you can follow Joel there on Instagram, as well as a link to the book and stuff like that also. But Joel, you've been excellent to have on here as a guest tonight. And definitely, I can wish it on you, but I already know you're going to have great success on stuff that you're doing going forward, and look forward to chatting more with you at some point.
Yeah,
and
100%.
Hopefully drinking with you as well.
That needs to happen too. I will hopefully get down to Cincinnati. I don't know when, but someday, or if you come up more this way, one way or the other, I would absolutely love that. This has been awesome, Rod. I have thoroughly enjoyed getting to come on and chat with you. Like you said, we're cutting it off here on 2 hours, but I feel like we could go on and on forever. So
that's what I tell people. Like,
I know
I'm always trying to be respectful. So,
I know I've very much enjoyed this for sure.
I'm like, John Goodman and Brother Where Art Thou? You know, like
Yeah.
you, my friend, I see you got the gift of gab. Why don't we take this out to the
my
countryside?
dad's a pastor. My dad's a pastor. I know how to talk. Trust me.
Yeah.
I am a yapper to my core. So I can go on and on about this, especially when I'm talking about stuff that I'm passionate about, like the breweries and my book. So
yeah,
you know, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm thankful for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming on, and we'll definitely check out the book and appreciate you being in the house. We'll go ahead and get it wrapped up here. Thank you for everybody that tuned in. Thursday night, back at 8 o'clock for the happy hour. And that one's usually, I don't know, 2 to 3. You guys know how it goes on Thursday night. I can't tell. It depends if who we got in for the cast, but Todd and them all here. We're chatting and we're shooting the gift. You know, just tune in for that. If you want to tune in for that, Joel, every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, we just have fun. And that one gets a little, you know, you asked about cussing earlier. That gets a little bit more like.
I always like to make sure.
Yeah. No. And the whole thing I thought about one time is there was to be a show called Hanging with Mr. Cooper. Mark Curry was the actor on the ABC show. And it was a comedy on ABC. And he had his stand-up routine. He came out on the stand-up routine. He's like, a lot of you know me from Hanging with Mr. Cooper, ABC, whatever. It's just like, yeah, this ain't that kind of show. And he would kind of go into the different stuff he was doing. It's kind of like Bob Saget from Full House. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks of him being a Full House, but he's like he was one of the most dirtiest comedians on stage.
Yeah.
When you see him do stand up. So Thursday night's a little more turned up, but it's really fun. Gets everybody into the weekends. We have a blast. We drink beers, we talk beers, and we get in all kinds of other stuff too. So if you're freed up, just let us know and check it out for sure. Yeah. So that's always a good time. But thanks again, everybody that tuned in. Make sure you check out the book as well. And again, at the top of the comments, you can see the link there, and I will drop it again in the description. And find out some more about Joel and the beers across America, because you might be going on a trip to one of these states, and it'd be nice to know some breweries you might want to hit. Thanks for everybody tuning in. Joel, if you want to hang out for a second, that's fine as well. And I'll go ahead and we'll close out, and I will see you all Thursday night. Cheers, everybody. No, that was